taking a look at Yuan-ti for NPCs, and we're going to use ChatGPT to help us create content. This is more or less not necessarily a tutorial, but kind of a way to inspire you to potentially use the power of an artificial intelligence platform to help you create content. Now, this by no means should replace human ingenuity and creativity, although it does cut out a lot of the typing and the work and the sorts of things that would normally take you hours to do. So I really like the idea that I have a lot more time and freedom to create content when I use content from ChatGPT, because it's a lot quicker. It's not perfect. It does make mistakes. Like the other day, I was making a NPC that was Yuan-ti, and it gave me the wrong spell save DC number. Sometimes it gives me the wrong armor class. So you do have to look over it because it's not perfect. You just simply tell it to redo it, or you can just copy and paste and make some minor changes depending on what you want to do. So I have ChatGPT open. I don't have a very big preview window of it, but if that's a thing, let me know, and I'll just bring that whole window over. But essentially, this is going to help facilitate creating the content in Fantasy Grounds. And one of the things that I've been working on the last several months is to find a quicker way to achieve some of this work. Because I know if you're creating content, especially if it's more than one or two things, it can be very time consuming. And what I'm really trying to do is kind of harness this technology to help build a homebrew content. So what I'm going to be doing now is kind of going through and creating some lore. I'm going to create some images, create some NPCs, and also consolidate some research that would take you a while to do when it comes to this type of topic. So I kind of want to create a kind of a, I guess, an accessory which would have NPCs, it would have lore, and it would have a little bit of art, and maybe even a map or so for like a temple. So the beauty of this is if you actually take the time to create the content and save it as a module, and then you can export it. And then later on down the line, when you need Yuan-ti, you're going to have your own module to deal with that. And I think that that's a very succinct and custom way of doing it for yourself, for your game, so you don't have to dig through the monster manual and all these other books looking for content. When you kind of consolidate it into one area, and then you have a little bit of blend of your homebrew stuff mixed in with some maps and stuff that you need. And whenever you want to run an adventure in the jungle that would have a Yuan-ti element to it, you just load that particular module to kind of run shotgun with your adventure. So like if you were running Tomb of Annihilation, you may want to have a side story arc that you want to throw in there, or perhaps even a main story arc for a homebrew campaign, just using the Tomb of Annihilation Chult setting as your backdrop. It's like a sandbox. So there's lots of things you can do. But let's get started. So I want to make some NPCs. I want to show you some artwork that I've been playing around with, and I'm going to kind of make a token for one of the main NPCs so you guys can see that process. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. If you have any questions, leave it in the chat. I may not respond right away, but I mean, I do have a way to look and see what's going on. But anyway, so without further ado, I'm going to go bring up the ChatGPT window just so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing here. So this is the ChatGPT interface. This is a paid version, so if you haven't used ChatGPT yet, or you're curious about it, some of the stuff or most of the stuff I'm doing would require a paid account. So if you are using the free account, you can do some of the content, like you can make tables and descriptions and stuff, but you're not going to have as much logic or the creativity that comes with ChatGPT 4, and you won't be able to do images, and there's a lot of other limitations, but nonetheless. So yeah, and I use it to make the social media post, which is kind of handy. So what I'm going to do now is kind of scroll back and get into the content that I was working on last night. And this is another thing that I like about creating content on here, because I can do a bunch of work like if I'm laying in bed or if I'm kind of bored sitting there waiting in a doctor's office, I mean, I can work on content and then later on port that over to Fantasy Grounds. So this sort of thing here, it talks about the gods that are available and maybe even some of the heroes. These all come from the Forgotten Realm, so I wouldn't use this in a commercial product, but if you're going to use this just for in general, I have Dendar the Night Serpent. He's a deity associated with the end of the world. He's often depicted as a giant serpent that consumes nightmares. It's believed that Dendar will eventually swallow the sun, bringing about the end of the world. So this is kind of a cool little write-up here. There's a Mershalk, Master of the Pit. He's known under the alias of Seth. Let's see, Mershalk is a deity that embodies the traits of death, suffering, and fear. So this is another god. Basically, he's in a current state of permanent hibernation due to the betrayal of his Suruk followers, and his portfolio has been overtaken by the Egyptian goddess Set, the Molarandi god of evil. So they kind of interplay the ancient Egyptian lore, kind of mix that in with the serpent god of Set. That's pretty cool. So the Yuan-ti still believe their prayers are answered by Mershalk himself. So Mershalk has kind of two different names. So Seth, the sibilant death, he is an aspect of Mershalk, is venerated by the Yuan-ti as a symbol of death and fear. He represents the cruel and malevolent aspects of the Yuan-ti pantheon. So there's a few choices here to kind of base some lore and literature. Let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and just take this information here, and I'm going to copy and paste this over into Fantasy Grounds. So I'll go ahead and minimize that. You can still kind of see the Chat GPT thing here. And let's go with, let's see. Now what I'm going to do is, you want to get to make your own story, but I think for right now, since I'm not ready for that aspect of it, I'm going to use the notes. So if you go into the player area under notes, you can start, gathering your information. And what's nice about this is if you format everything in the notes area, the formatting and all that kind of stuff will go and copy and paste into other cells. So that wasn't a thing like over a year ago. They didn't have that functionality. You would lose all of your formatting, which really sucked. So that's a kind of a nice thing that's changed over the years with Fantasy Grounds. So I'm just going to put Yuan-ti research. And the reason I numbered it is just a habit to get into whenever you make content, to have it numbered. And this may not end up being the final number, but if I make more notes, it'll be in order. And then what I might do is do a little bit of formatting, not too much. So I might just put Yuan-ti Pantheon or something like that as a header. And once you get used to Fantasy Grounds and how to use the text editor, things get a lot easier. So pardon me, I gotta... Yeah, so things get a little easier once you learn the shortcuts on Fantasy Grounds. So for instance, I'm highlighting this Yuan-ti here, the letters. I'm going to hit Control 2, and that makes that header. So Control 1 through 6 have different functions. So like Control 1 is like regular text, like this body text here. Control 2 is this bold thing. I think Control 3 makes a chat window. There's different functionalities. I mean, you can always right-click and go to paragraph types and select it here. But if you want to be more efficient and kind of work quicker, you learn the shortcuts for formatting text. It really helps a lot. It took me several years to really start realizing that. Only in the last few years have I really kind of grasp these concepts. Previous to that, I was just kind of hand typing everything in and then right clicking, and it just took a long time to do anything. So another thing you can do with text is you can right click and you can clean up the text by clicking on this little wand. And what that does is it takes out that extra space from copy and paste. So a lot of times when you copy from the internet or from HTML or from a PDF, you'll have those double spaces in there. So that's a nice handy tool that's been built into Fantasy Grounds as well, to help speed up the process of having to strip out the text and reformat. You could highlight text and hit Control-J, and that'll strip out all the carriage returns. But a quicker way to kind of reformat this is to right-click and then go to clean up text, and that'll get rid of the extra spaces. So that's kind of a handy tool. So I just put that in there just so I have a reference, and I'll have a place to to check this stuff out later. So I'll go ahead and close that. And I'm going to go over to this NPC record here, which is your Fantasy Grounds stuff. Now this is kind of this part is kind of unique to the DnD5e rule set. So this import tool doesn't exist in every rule set. Each one has their own formatting, their own tools, and some of them don't have any tools at all for this. But this, you can import D&D stat blocks as long as they are formatted correctly. So in other words, they have to have the proper format, or it's not going to work. It'll just anger you is what it will do. So I'm going to actually move this over. There we go. I don't want that in the way anymore. And then what we're going to do here is take this text from Chat GPT and copy and paste it over into the Fantasy Grounds platform. So rather than taking a open stat block, a basic one, and then trying to fill this out one by one, we're going to use the import tool that comes with the 5e rule set to make this a little easier. So a lot of this depends on your source. So it might be a PDF, it might be D&D Beyond, or it might be a homebrew thing. Regardless of where it comes from, the text actually has to be the correct format. It has to be laid out the right way. It can't have extra characters. I mean, it's very picky. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So we'll take it and copy and paste information over here on the left, which is the stat block. And then if you have any lore, or like you want a picture and all that stuff, that goes over on this right-hand side. If you put it all on one side here, it's going to ruin the parsing. It's going to throw it off. So I'm going to go back to Chat GPT and scroll up past this beautiful artwork here. And let's check out, see, these are some of the images that I was able to create, which I'll pull on those later. Some of them have some distortion here, like this is kind of weird, but the only thing I'm really going to use is the face for some tokens, so I'm not too concerned about that, but they do look pretty cool. This one turned out good. This is one of the NPCs I'm going to make. So this is the Histashi. They're kind of like servants. They are created to kind of watch over the eggs and stuff, so these are kind of cool looking. But let me get into this. Okay, so here is the Histashi NPC stat block. So the background here is going to go on the background side of Fantasy Grounds. So I don't necessarily want to put that on the right hand or on the left hand side. So this is the background information. So I'll put it on that side. And then on this left side will be the actual stat block. So you don't want to include the background in the stat block side of things. So here is the, whoops, what the hell happened here? Okay, here we go. All right, so this is the stat block. So previously I thought that this would actually break the parsing, but this table information doesn't get picked up with the parsing tools, so that's good. I went through this with Robert Aducci. He and I were trying to figure out a way to get it to create stat blocks without making problems for us. And this is one of the things that we had discovered, is that this table makes the ability scores and the abbreviations correct. Because what was happening is it was just kind of doing its own thing, and if those aren't correct, if they're not laid out properly, it's gonna not parse correctly. So that's one of those things. And I noticed here it says intimidation +0, so that's kind of broken here. So when I import this, I'll change that and I'll put probably intimidation +2 or whatever, and then I'll put some other skill in there. So you can kind of mix and match and do these things manually, or you can do them this way. I could ask it to recreate the entire stat block, but I think that's unnecessary. And one thing you got to kind of learn and get away from is to keep generating just for one little change, because you end up losing your usages too quickly that way. So let's say you generate a picture or some text and you're not quite happy with it. It's missing one little period, or it has one word misspelled. Don't redo that whole thing unless it's necessary. And the reason for that is even if you're using the paid version, you're going to run out of times that you can actually submit within a certain time frame. So there are limits on what you can do with Chat GPT. So you kind of have to be a little bit more judicious in your usage. I found that out the hard way by making 20 different iterations of the same thing. It's just not worth it in most cases. So I'll fix that manually once I paste that in. So I'll go back to Fantasy Grounds and hit Control V as in Victor, and that pulls in the stat block with all the actions and everything. And it actually pulled something in here I don't want, so I'll get rid of that. And this is called a Hitachi Enforcer, because they're kind of like the cannon fodder that they would use if they were having an assault or an attack. And then I'm going to take and capitalize this one, and then I'm going to put a bold on that. And then right-click, clean up, right-click, clean up. Now, you don't have to do the right-click cleanup thing. I just want to see what it's going to look like. But this intimidation thing, I was going to change that to, let's see, they have a charisma of, oh, geez, no wonder it's 0. Yeah, so intimidation is based off of charisma, so I don't think I'm going to put that there. What I might do is survival, because they are pretty hardy. Survival, I'll say +2. And then comma, let's go with maybe perception. Let's see, what are they good at here? So they have a pretty decent wisdom. So yeah, I'll say perception will be +1 or +2 or something like that. Yeah, because they're second level. It'll actually be +3 because it's their proficiency bonus plus their ability score bonus. And I believe, let's see, is this intelligence? So strength, dex, con. Oh, no, I guess not. So we'll just leave that as it is. We'll just do survival. There we go. All right, so they have a couple actions, some traits. They have a slam attack, and they have this retch ability that's really stink. And then all this stuff here. So we'll see if it comes out correctly. And what I notice right now is that this has these colons after, which it will break the parsing. So these are little things that you'll notice when you start using Chat GPT to create content. If those don't have a period after them, it's gonna break the parsing. So you want to make sure there's a period after that, not a hyphen or a blank space or a semicolon. That needs to be there as a period, and not just anything at once, essentially, because it's going to break the parsing. So go ahead and hit import, and it looks pretty good so far. So yeah, so it did it correct. Understands the languages of its creator but can't speak. Passive perception is 9. Yeah, this is fine. This will work. And then on the other tab is where that other stuff goes. So it looks pretty good once it's done. And it looks like it did the recharge correctly. It did the slam attack, and then it talks about the stench and the retch, so that's pretty cool. So I like it. Now what you would do at this point is if you already had your art done, you would assign your token. So one of the approaches that you want to do, if you're going to do more than a couple, you probably want to do all the artwork first and then put those in Fantasy Grounds. So then when you're doing this, you can just grab them and go. So if you don't do that and you're trying to do this all in separate stages, it's going to take you forever to make content. So if you're going to make a big project, you kind of want to do it in chunks. So I'm doing it kind of one by one because I want to show you the process. But for the most part, though, if you want it to be smoother and not take forever, I would have a list of NPCs, make all the art for it, and then make all the stat blocks, and then put them all in groups. This way, you're not switching back and forth 50,000 times to create content. But if you're only doing one or two, who cares? So this is right now the default is it's giving this letter H as the token, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I want to make something more fancy, so I want to bring back up Chat GPT, and I want to bring up this one. So I don't know. I think this is the one I wanted to use. So what I will do is import this image into Fantasy Grounds. But when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you rename your files and that you're organized, because you can make a really big mess really quick. And you don't want weird file names that you're not going to recognize and those sort of things. So I'm going to go into my downloads folder where this content downloaded. And then I'm going to organize the image and then make a token. So that's one of the things that you kind of have to do to make things easier on you, especially if you're doing a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'm just going to call it Yuan-ti because I don't have a good title for it. And then anything that I want to go in there, I'd put it there. And then it's going to open it up in preview. Yeah, so this is actually a Histachi. So I'm going to give it a title. So I'm going to say Histachi and then underscore NPC. Just so I have a naming convention, and I would stick with that if you're going to, keep doing these like all day or whatever, just kind of keep a format. And one of the things I notice is that when you create content from Chat GPT, it makes this long description. It's like over 50 characters. Fantasy Grounds doesn't like that after a certain length. I don't know what the token length is on the text limit, but if this thing has like a 50 gazillion numbered thing on there, it's going to cause problems with Fantasy Grounds, so just let you know. So you want to rename your content so you know what the heck it is. And then I'm going to make a subfolder, and this is going to be called art. And then there's going to be another one for maps, so new. So if I have any maps, it's going to go in there. And then the next one is going to be NPCs, which is where this one's going to go. NPC art. So these are just kind of ways to kind of make this a little bit smoother and a little bit less painful. So that's going to be the art. Now the next thing I'm going to do is make like a token with one of the free website things. So I'm sure most of you have seen this before. So this is token stamp 2. This allows you to create your own tokens. It is kind of laborious because you're looking at one at a time. So, it can take a while. So there are other tools out there to make that process a little easier. I use Canva, and I kind of have my own template, and I'll put all that stuff in there. It's a lot easier to do it in bulk that way. But in this case, I'm just going to do one, so it's not the end of the world here. But I'm going to drag the artwork that I generated and put that in there. And then I'm going to stretch it out. Now this is a PNG file, which is a lot more ideal than a JPEG or a different format because it'll stretch better. It'll look, cleaner. It won't be so distorted. So I kind of want mostly just his face. I mean, I want a little bit of his body, but I think that looks pretty good. What do you guys think? And then for the border, I don't know if I want it. Well, it kind of works though, because it's got that beige kind of thing going on, but I think honestly, I'd probably make it a little bit darker. There we go. So that's that. I could make it green or whatever, but I think this kind of matches and it kind of fits with more of a natural tone. All right, so that's the token. So when you render these tokens from this website, it's usually a PNG file. It'll say like token 1 or whatever. And it's usually 256 by 256, which is the standard image size for Fantasy Grounds if you're going to use the VP or the the web P format. So when you go to let's see, this is the Atlassian, and then you start looking at the requirements. Let's see, we'll say let's see, image size. It's kind of what I wanted. So there we go. So this kind of gives you the, the idea of what the file size, those sort of things are. So this tells you can do WebM or WebP. It also talks about importing directly into Fantasy Grounds from Dungeon Draft, Dungeon Fog, Dungeon Alchemist, Hero Forge, things like that. But this is where you're going to learn about the limitations and the requirements for images. Some people just throw something in there willy-nilly, which is fine once in a while. But when you start throwing in huge files that take up a lot of room and that are not optimized for transferring back and forth between your table and your players, it can really get out of hand, and it does. So there's a developer guide, which is what they've published if you're going to put out product. And when you're wanting to create content for Fantasy Grounds, they have this published out here so that when you're making stuff, you don't go too far out in the woods there. So for like images, they recommend WebP at 75% quality, and then they give you, the maximums. And then for tokens, this is kind of what they recommend. So that's what I'm looking at right now is the token requirements. So this is the hey, what's up, Sven? So this is the token requirement. So if you're going to use WebP, they recommend this. And it looks like they're going to WebP because it's preferred to allow for larger token resolutions and still produce smaller file sizes. If you use PNG format, these are still acceptable at 100 by 100 pixels for small and medium, and 200 for anything large. But if you're going to use WebP, you can do 256 by 256 for small to medium, and then 512 for anything larger. So the default dimensions for exporting this thing is 256 by 256, which is perfect. I don't have to do any changes or anything, but I will change the resolution a little, and I will change the token. So if I go to this new volume here, let's see, I want to go to the downloads folder. I want to find that token. There it is. So token 1 is what it called it. So I'll just drag that over into my folder for now. And then I want to take and rename it. So I'm going to say TKN for token. And then I'll do Histashi. And then I always put a number in case there ends up being more than one. So TKN Histashi _01. And there's a reason for that is if you have like 3 variations, you kind of want to have them numbered. And then the TKN is kind of like your prefix so that you know what kind of file it is right away. So that really helps with that. Now I'm going to make a new folder called tokens. And that way, when I go to put it in Fantasy Grounds, I'll know where these go because they don't all go in the same folder. So there's tokens. And then what I'll do is I will take the image itself, take a quick look at it just to make sure it's still a transparency. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now I'll take this file and hit copy or cut or whatever. I think copy. I want to leave the original. And then when you go into Fantasy Grounds, you have an assets folder. And what you're going to want to do is bring that up, your assets, which is over here on the right in this case. And then you want to go to your, you want to click on tokens up here and then go to folder. And you'll have to go into your campaign. They changed the behavior on that. I'm not sure what happened, but now I just come in here and I'm going to make a subfolder called tokens. So new folder. I could have copied and pasted the other folder, but I didn't know that they were going to be, it was going to be like this. So I take tokens and then just paste that in here. And now what I want to do is whenever you add or change anything in the assets, you want to hit this refresh. And that's going to actually create a folder called campaign. And when you open that up, your token will be in there. And this is the image that I'm going to use to apply to this token here. So I'll just drag this over. It replaces that letter H, and it's now part of the campaign. So whenever you load this module, all those tokens will be with it, and they'll be part of that campaign because they're in the campaign folder. If you use a token from your master folder, which is the higher level of the on the back end of Fantasy Grounds, it probably won't take those. But if you have it inside of the campaign folder, a copy of it, and you associate your NPC records and such with that file, it should export with it, and it should associate with that automatically. So if someone else were to load this and they didn't have those assets in their library, it may not show up if this is not in the correct directory. So it's kind of, a good reason to be organized. The other thing is, the reason they're going with this WebP thing is if you've got 30 tokens, it's going to be a lot smaller than, 30 that are formatted with the PNG. Now, that's one thing I forgot to do, so I'm going to actually end up redoing this. But I'm going to go back into this folder that I was working with, and I'm going to change the format of that token and of the artwork. So that's one of the steps that I forgot, which is actually an important step. So I'm going to go back to a downloads folder and go in and change the format of the tokens, because the format now is PNG. So if I go in here and go to tokens, if I left click and hover, it's only 107 kilobytes. So that's not a lot of room. But when you actually have like 50 of them, that can add up to a couple megabytes that are unnecessary. You don't necessarily have to have that. But I'm going to go ahead and open it. You can use it with any program that you have that may support this. So if I go to GIMP, that's what I'm going to use. It's a free program like Adobe. And it just kind of bring that up. And it kind of gives me a chance to look at it too. So sometimes we just blindly download stuff and they don't realize if there's a mistake or anomalies or whatever. But anyways, now that it's in here, I'm going to hit File and Export As. And I'm just going to change the prefix or the suffix here. So it's going to be WebP. And then hit Export. And it's going to bring up a dialog box. This is where you can set the image quality. So I'm going to go down to 75 like they had suggested. Leave everything else the same and hit export. And then I'm going to do the same thing with that artwork that I had earlier, the full picture. So I'm going to go in here and go into the art, or actually that was NPC art. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll just drag that in here. This is the full picture. So if I wanted to show this to my players, I'd have this full image. So I'm going to do the same thing. File, save as. I'm going to actually export it. In this case, export as. And then WebP is the format. Hit export. It's going to bring up this little dialog box. It's already set to the last settings that I used. I hit export. So I've just converted those to WebP, so they take up a lot less room, and they're a lot easier to manage. It is an extra step. It can be a pain in the ass, but if you do it in batches, it's not as hard. So some programs will allow you to do batch files. So if I hit File and then go to Batch Image Manipulation, you can get a plugin for this. Just look up Batch Image Manipulation for GIMP and install the plugin. And this will allow you to add multiple images or folders, and then you can convert them all at once instead of doing it one at a time. So there are ways to do it. Like if you get everything set, put in a folder, get everything named, convert everything, and then move them into Fantasy Grounds, it's a lot easier. But the way I'm doing it right now is kind of a hack, because I'm showing you how to do this, but I'm not showing you the right way to handle a large project. So just let you know that there's a better way to do this. So I want to go into the assets again, which is over here, and go to this folder and go to my campaign folder, which is this jungle biome thing I'm working on. And under images, I'm going to go ahead and paste this, and that's the WebP format. So if I go back to the original folder and I compare those two files, it's really gonna, like, this one is 1.8 megabytes without being converted. But the other file, that the WebP version, is like 126 kilobytes. So it's like more than a, it's small. It's more than, it's like a fifth of the size of the other things or something like that. So this is a really big change in departure in what we're used to. And if you use like a JPEG, the quality isn't as good usually. So it just depends. So we already have that. Now I need to go back into the tokens folder and I want to fix this JPEG here, or this PNG file, just so you guys can see that. The same thing though. I'm going to go back into campaigns, go to the tokens folder, and right now it's a PNG. Now this isn't very big, but like I said, when you have like 20 to 50, 100 tokens, they do add up. So it's one of the things you got to be careful with tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on there and go ahead and open it up in GIMP like I had earlier. I wish I would have done this sooner, but oh well. So this is a kind of a lesson learned. You get efficient, you learn how your workflow. So file, export as, and WebP is the format. And then I'm going to hit export, and it's already saved at 75% quality. Hit export, and that'll add another token here. So what I'm going to do actually is delete this one. I'm going to come back and I'm going to refresh this folder, and now you notice that the token's gone. That's because I deleted it. So now I'm going to re-drag this over, and that should fix that. Yep. So now we have the image that is the token. And then for the other image, what I could do is link it back here. So the image isn't part of the campaign record for the main image that I made, the big picture. So what you want to do is in your assets, whenever you have assets, you can import them one at a time, or you can do it in bulk. But I'm going to click on the images folder, go to campaign, and here's the actual image, the larger image. So at this point, what I'm going to do is add it to the campaign through the images section. So right now it's just in the folder. It's not part of the campaign yet. So in this drop-down menu, I'm going to create a new group, and I'm just going to call this Yuan-ti NPCs for a lack of a better title. Yuan-ti NPCs. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of the edit mode, select that. Now what you can do is you can drag it over and drop it. You can set, you can create image record, or you can import it in bulk. I prefer to do that on a larger project, but this is kind of a one-off. So I'll go ahead and hit create image record. It'll pull itself over to here, and now it is actually part of the campaign. So now what I will do is take a look at it, which it looks pretty good. It says Histashi NPC. Over here, I might put a reptilian creature, because I don't necessarily want to share this and give out the name of it. Kind of cut back on metagaming, and then go ahead and make that an unidentified creature. Lock the image, and once that's done, then I'll drag it over and put it on the stat block. So now we have an image, we have the token, and a complete stat block. Now, that's a lot of work for one NPC. So if you're going to do multiple NPCs, you're going to want to do it in groups instead of one at a time, unless you have that time or you don't care. I mean, if you're going to do a conversion or a big commercial product, you're going to want to definitely change how you do things. But if you only got like one or two, who cares, right? It's not a big deal. So this is just a way to get that going. So now their next step is, once you create that kind of content, you want to check it. So we'll lock this, and I will close some of this stuff in the background just so we're not getting confused, and bring up the combat tracker. And what I'm going to do is put the NPC on here just to make sure it's parsing correctly and that all the actions show up properly. So take this, left click and drag. It's now part of this combat tracker. And then what we can do is open up the offense section, which is this little, in this case, it's a sword, but it might look a little different in your theme. Yeah, so here's the saving throw. Here's the poison effect for the stench. Here's the attack roll and the damage for the slam attack. And then the retch thing is kind of like a one-off thing where it recharges. So that looks pretty good. So let's double click and check it out. So let's see, there's the attack roll, there's the damage, there's a saving throw. So let's make him save against himself. And he succeeded, so no damage. Let's make him save versus his own retch. So he saved, but if he didn't, the effect would be poison for 1 round. So these are just things you want to check before you move on. So that's why these things cost so much money. You got to go through all this stuff and, to make sure it's working before you move on. So let's take a look at some more Chat GPT stuff. So I want to create something to go along with this. I want to do a little bit more of a complex NPC. So we're going to do Zathra. She's kind of she's a CR7 sorceress. So a little bit more to her than this guy. So again, same process, go through all those steps, but I'm just going to do the NPC stat block for now. So I want to go and bring up the, what was that? We're going to bring up the Chat GPT, get out of that image there, and go back in, and let's take a look at Zathra. So it's this her right here. Now this is the Yuan-ti Snake Priest. So this is one of her colleagues here. So this is a CR4 priest. It probably worships one of those gods, that's probably why I generated that content. So actually, I'll just bring this in now. I want to check see, sometimes they'll put the spell casting in the actions area. You want to try to watch that. But this probably looks all right. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this data and then go back into Fantasy Grounds, go into the NPCs like I had earlier, and bring up the import tool. I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor. I'm going to take the background and hit Control V there and delete the background from here because I don't want that to interfere. And then right click and clean up the text. Take this information up here. I'm going to highlight, make that bold. And then the Yuan-ti Snake Priest, I'm just going to take that and hit Control V and then Control 2, which is going to make it kind of a bold heading. And then we'll go from there. So that is basically all I need to do. Let me check these. So yeah, again, it made these stat blocks a little bit wrong because it's putting these colons instead of a period after the traits and stuff. So it won't work if it's like spell casting, that trait, it has to have a period after it. You can't have anything else or it's going to break it. Okay, so let's see. Actions. Got the sling fixed. Okay, we'll see what it does. Yeah, so it looks right so far. Yep. So there's all the spell casting stuff, the innate spells and the regular spell casting for the priest. And then here's a snake staff that has poison and bludgeoning damage. And then there's a sling. And then here's the back, the art piece. So that's pretty cool. I like that. So this makes this process a lot faster. If you're going to do NPCs, it won't take as long. And actually, I could go back and change the formatting and such so that it quits doing that, because it's given me the, kind of a bad thing as far as the formatting goes. But then I will take this NPC, drop it in this combat tracker, check out the offense, and that's what I'm looking for, is all this stuff. Like, did it parse correctly? Is it listing it? If it's got some automation. So this is the kind of thing you're going to do with custom NPCs. So this is just a way to use Chat GPT to kind of enhance your content creation. So again, let's make this priest. So what I'm going to do, I want a picture of him. So I'm going to take his background and I'm going to say, please create a prompt. I'm going to say a Dall-E 3 prompt for the snake. So I'm going to make an image of this guy, and then I'm going to go ahead and put his background in here just so it has some more context. And let's see. I'll say he's anthropomorphic. That way he's more of a kind of a hybrid, anthropomorphized or whatever. And I'm going to say some things here that are important in this generation. Is I'll say expert Dungeons and Dragons artwork, or character artwork. So that helps give it an idea of what you're after as far as the coloring and the type of the art you're looking at, because otherwise they'll just make whatever. And then I want to put something about the style of it. Like, I want to actually give it some parameters for the looks of it. So this is getting into prompt engineering, and once you start learning how the prompts work and the limitations, it gets a lot easier. But I'm going to go ahead and put in, let's see, I want to put in something to do with the oil painting. So I want to put in, let's see, professionally designed oil painting style. And I'll say digital. Otherwise it'll look like a paintbrush. And that's not a bad thing. If you like that style, that's fine. And then for the form, and not just the coloring as such, I want kind of a 3D animation form. I don't want it to look like a video game, but I want it to have that level of detail. But I still want that oil painting feel. I don't want it to look like a MMO game. So 3D animation, Octane render, which is your 3D app, and I'll say style. And then as far as the formatting goes for the orientation of the image, I can leave it at, if I leave it now, it'll make it a square, which isn't a bad thing. I think I will ask it though to try to use kind of a profile, or like the long and tall. So 9:16 tall vertical aspect ratio. So I'm going to ask it to do that. It doesn't always do it, but it usually does. Okay, so once we do that, let's see what it gives us. So we're doing images now in the same conversation. Previously, that was harder to do, and it would confuse the application, and still kind of does, but it's not as bad. So you can now create images, you can examine images, you can make text, you can do all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. There are still limitations, like you can't request like 50 of these in like an hour. They'll cut you off for a while. So that's what I was saying earlier. Make sure that you kind of know what you're doing. So I don't mind this, but I don't want the text. See, this is a thing that, so I could technically just take this stuff out with a program. I don't have to necessarily re-render it. But if you want to keep that style and you want to stay kind of consistent in your artwork, what would be helpful is when you request for the image ID. So I will ask what is the image generation ID, which is like a seed for the image above, ? And it will examine it and it'll say, okay, here's the seed or the image ID number for it. Provided it doesn't crash on me, because it can get really busy. Okay, so what this does is it allows you some consistency. So if I want to keep the art style and the coloring and that sort of thing, that's kind of what is stored in that. It's not going to make an exact duplicate copy, but you can get close. So what I'm going to say is, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to say recreate image gen ID number, and then I'm going to put the number there, make sure I have the right one, but without the text and with a little more detail, but keep the coloring and style. So I do like the style. So we'll see if that helps at all. But this is what I'm saying, like, honestly, I could just download this and just take out the text. Not that big of a deal, but you can ask it to regenerate. And as long as you have this code here, this number, all your next, if you do more art, you would tell it to refer to that, and you would get this style that'd be more consistent, instead of it creating a whole different picture that doesn't even look like anything else from your art. So if you want more consistency of style and color and the form, this having that image ID number really helps a lot. Otherwise, if you don't ask it the same way every time, or you make one little change, it can drastically change what it's going to create. And that may not please you if you're going to be doing a big project and you want to use art. So that's cool, but what I don't like is that it added all those extra snakes in the background. But that still kind of goes. But if you look at that, that's kind of deformed. Like this doesn't make any sense right here. And then you got, this stuff looks cool down here. This looks great. I don't mind this hood and the staff, but then you got the staff here, and then you got this other one here. So that really, these are the kinds of little anomalies that you're going to come across. So I'm going to say recreate, and this is what I'm telling you about wasting your edits for the day or for your time. If you're doing a bunch of these, you got to be kind of careful. You want to wait a bit, and you kind of want to make sure that this is something you don't want, because technically you can probably edit this all out with a Photoshop. But I'm going to say recreate, but fix the deformities, and it may not, but at least it knows that I don't like what I'm seeing. So the deformities and the weirdness. So for the most part, Dall-E 3 has the eyes and arms and stuff kind of figured out. It's not as bad as it used to be. You couldn't create hands or weapons or snakes. It still has problems with it, but it is sure a lot better than it used to be. So I'm going to say, again, I'm going to remind it, So image gen ID number, and then we'll see what it does. And I'm not so sure about the beard. Not too. I mean, it's not horrible, but I didn't want the beard. This is closer to what I wanted. We'll see what it does. I think the word beard is what's driving that. Or priest, I mean. Yeah, not too bad. I can actually cut most of this out. But overall, it looks pretty good. So I'd use another program and just remove all this, probably take all this stuff and put it in Canva. So let me try that. So I'm going to remove the background, see what it does, see how it looks. Because then I can just, yeah, that looks really good. So I can put that wherever I want. And that'll make up for that. But yeah, I got rid of all that extra stuff in there, which is great. And then you can just take like a jungle background and see if there's any assets already. So jungle, wilderness, we'll see if it has anything that I can use that's kind of cool. Yeah, it looks all photo quality so far. Let me try fantasy. Yeah, and it looks kind of video game-ish, but it would work in a pinch. Yeah, so something like that might do the trick, just to have it. Because this is background, so it's not gonna kill anything. And then change that to go to backwards. There you go. So you can do something like that to kind of make it look more realistic, I guess. It's not bad. And then go to edit photo, maybe add some shadow, maybe a little bit of a drop shadow. There we go. So that turned out pretty good. Not too bad. So that's doable for a homebrew game. I mean, I'm not doing this for, for a professional company. I do notice it's got a little bit of work that needed to be done, but, from a distance, who cares? So it's not bad. I mean, you kind of get what you want. I don't know if I would necessarily use this, but it is pretty cool looking. So this is something I might make tokens with. I do have a thing in here where I use this to create tokens, but this could be a potential artwork that you might use for to create the token for this particular NPC. You won't even need the whole body. So it just depends on what your needs are and how much time you have. But that would be what I would use and assign that to the priest. And then maybe if that artwork turned out good, I'd link it like I did with the other. So these are just things that you can do in I guess, in Fantasy Grounds and with the Chat GPT. So another thing that I developed that kind of came up over time was tables. So I want to do a rumor table, or no, a behavior table for the priestess, or for the sorceress. So what I'll do is go back to Chat GPT and close all this out. I don't need this stuff right now. And what I'm going to do is ask to make a table. So I'm going to say, please create a rollable table, or rollable list, excuse me. You say table, it's going to make a table. I would just want a text list for the attitude, for the potential. This will be like a role-playing thing. Potential attitudes for the sorceress, because she's like the big bad evil girl. Please create a rollable list for the potential attitudes. I'll say ARP roleplay. And then I'm going to say, please create a 6 result, or actually 4 result list, because that's something that you kind of want to do, because it'll make like a 20 deep. You don't want that. And then I'm going to say use my custom instructions, because I did provide this with some customized text in the back end of it. I'll say for formatting the list. We'll see if it can handle it. If not, I'll have to beat it in a submission. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. All right, so this is exactly what I had told the Chat GPT to do. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this data and put it into Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go back to Fantasy Grounds, go over here to tables. Again, I would make my own group if I'm going to make tables. So I'm just going to hit this add button here, and then I'm going to add the edit list. And then I'm just going to say Yuan-ti, let's say Yuan-ti tables or something like that. Because there's going to be a variety. I love tables. They kind of help you vary your game a little bit and add some replay value sometimes, depending on what you're doing. So here's the Yuan-ti tables, and then I'm going to go to import text. And what I want to do is kind of show you, one of the things you want to do is, like, this is the title, right? So sorceress role play attitudes. So hit control copy, and then that goes up here on the top. So that's the name of this list here, or the table. I call it list because in Chat GPT, it's going to give you issues. You don't want that. It'll make a table. You don't want a table. You just need the text. So that's that. And then I don't want the extra spaces, which is easy to fix. So each one of these is on its separate line, and it has that line there, which is a pipe, which is going to separate the roll number against the result. And you always want to use a 2-digit number if you can help it. So instead of this one single digit, I always use 2, just kind of a placeholder type thing. And then we want to select eliminated, because that's going to help us with the separation. And we're going to select pipe. We don't want commas or colons or semicolons, because those can occur within a sentence. So that would throw that off. Is the column header the first row? Yes, it's 1d4 results. So that's true. And table ranges in first column. So that's the number. So yes. Now we're going to go ahead and hit import. And that's basically all you have to do there. So the formatting is important, but the end result, once you understand how this works, it's pretty nice. And you don't have to sit there and copy and paste every one of these one at a time. Sometimes it's okay to do that. Like you only have one table, you know, who cares, or a short one. But if you got 100 results and stuff, that's going to take forever. So now something like this, I might put that on the back of their sheet. So I have that table handy during gameplay. So you might want to use this for roleplay. And you roll this. You can change the visibility so it's not visible to the players, but the GM can click on this. And it says she'll act aloof and mysterious. The sorcerer speaks in riddles and avoids direct answers, always seeming to have hidden motives. So that could be her attitude for the day. You can do stuff like that to kind of make this more interesting, especially when you're kind of lagging behind and you don't have, you know, the motivation and you're still kind of struggling. Maybe you're waking up. It's nice to have this sort of information handy. So anyways, this is just demonstrating some of the things that can be done rather quickly once you understand the formatting and how this stuff works and the limitations and all the little caveats that, you know, that go along with it. But once you get a good handle on it, it's a lot easier to deal with. And if you have a big project, this will speed things up quite a bit. So I think I'm going to get going. I'm going to have a brunch and spend some time with the family. But take care, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Happy holidays. And I will see you around. And I'll have the links for some of this content